we'll open up in prayer and get started. I'm sure other people will join us. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all that you have been doing in our lives. And we know that you have more for us. Lord, we accept your authority and your move, your spirit in this place. We ask that you would speak through our guests that are coming to share with us. We bless your name in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Right, everyone. So thus far, we have come to the point where we are going to move from disruptive thinking to disruptive doing. So we've been walking through the words of T.D. Jakes, trying to transform our visions into reality, resist the existing way of thinking, and move forward concerning our goals and our achievements. And we recognize that life's going to come with challenges, yes, but we have to overcome those challenges. And at some point, we're going to have to take the leap that is crossing over from desiring to claiming it, from wanting it to achieving it, from believing to being it. So we're taking this leap from disruptive thinking to disruptive doing. And that means we're going to possibly be entering some unfamiliar territory. And that could be meaning we're going to be walking and treading an unbeaten path, which means we're going to have to push through and push past some emotions that may try to deter us and keep us from the realities that we want to take. And as you may notice, hello, Minister Billy, thank you for joining us. As you may notice, we have some invited guests that have joined us. These are individuals who didn't just have a dream, but they actually took the leap and made their visions a reality. And so I'm going to invite our first guest, who is no stranger to us, Miss Suzette. You all have known her longer than me. I have just been connected with her through VGC. I've been following her Susie Q's on business practices. She has since launched an international conference and has been growing in consulting. So I'm just going to hand the platform over to her for her to share her story and how God's hand has been working in her and enabling her to take that leap of faith into her mission and purpose. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. Always so honored to be here, and so blessed when you sent me that email. I was like, no matter what, I'm going to work my schedule so I can come in and talk to my peeps. So I truly appreciate you thinking of me. And yes, I've been with VGC for, almost 8 years. We've been a part of that VGC family. And, in terms of, my business, so my background is in HR, human resources. That is really what I do as my main area of focus is human resources. But also there's a component of that I do coaching for leaders. So I also do what I would call leadership coaching. So I've worked with a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs in terms of helping them to lead more effectively, and in so doing, be more like their HR advisor. So when I left corporate, and I decided to build out a business, I have an HR consulting business, but I find that I'm also pulled to be that HR advisor and confidant to a lot of my leaders that are my clients. So I would say that that's sort of the two-part piece of my consulting business. As far as the international component goes, I used to do HR internationally when I was in corporate, and that's where I sort of got that feel for HR on an international level, going from country to country and learning all the different HR laws, as well as understanding the culture and how that works in different countries. So, in one country, you might be able to come in and say, this is the way the policy is. And in other countries, it's like the country law trumps your policy, right? So it's like you have to do a bit of a dance in how you present things, because not every country reacts well to it. So it's understanding culture. And one of my biggest learnings is realizing that cultural awareness, when you show up in different countries, especially how you're received as a woman, and also how you're received as a Black woman. And God has been so good and so instrumental in putting me in boardrooms as a woman and as a Black woman, but realizing that because the culture is predominantly male in those rooms in certain countries, having to know how to finesse my conversations to not cause them to negate what I have to say, right? So those are some things that I had to learn because I can't just come in like a bulldozer and say, but listen, this is what you got to do. In certain countries, I'm looked at like you're female just off the top. So what you have to say doesn't matter, right? So you have to understand the culture and use your finesse within those cultures. And it's not a matter of, oh, I am woman, hear me roar. It's about understanding in that culture, that is the way it is. So it's that culture awareness. And, we've moved the needle forward for women, but at the same time, we still have to understand that cultural awareness in how you're viewed and the role that you serve primarily. As far as the launch and the leap of faith, so I had many businesses before. I was in corporate, I started a business. And, I launched a business and the business didn't do well and I filed for bankruptcy. So I've always had the urge to do business, right? And so each time that I tried to launch a business, I missed a key component, which was to remember the financial strategy. So I would launch a business, I would say, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And unfortunately, I didn't have the financial strategy. Also, too, you also have to learn when you're launching a business that you cannot be the person who is, as I always say, cleaning the plane, flying the plane, serving the food on the plane. You have to have a strategy of what it is you are going to need in terms of resources. So each and every time my business was not as successful, I realized it's that common denominator of me trying to do it all and it's not sustainable, right? So I paused for a bit and continued my business, continued working in corporate, where I was able to really just sort of build that financial framework that I needed to launch my business. So what do I mean? Like, what do I mean by that? I looked at my corporate um, job as the machine that would fuel my business. So I set a strategic timeline in which I was like, I'm going to walk away from this corporate environment when I have this much financially and when I have this strategy. So, what am I saying? I prayed, I planned, and I prepared. Leap of faith is great. Leap is a big word, leap. But you also have to understand that most of the time, faith without works can be problematic. So the works comes into the preparation, the planning, and understanding what is it that you need. So fortunately for me, my kids are grown, they're out the house. So, it's just Suzette. But if you are somebody that has other elements, other factors that determine you taking this leap, you have to be really thinking through that. I'm not saying that you can't do it, but you have to be realistic about how you are planning this and be very strategic and mindful of the timeline. Don't be in a rush because you see other people jumping out there and doing their business, because statistics has shown us that oftentimes people that launch a business, it may not be sustainable. Some businesses don't make it to 5 years. Some businesses don't even make it to 2 years. So you want to look at what's your capability, your capacity, and your planning for your business to be a success. Because I would be like watching people and saying, well, how come their business worked and mine didn't? How come? Well, it didn't work because I didn't go get myself an accountant. I didn't go sit down and talk to someone and was like, what's the strategic plan? And I'm not talking about going to a bank and writing a business plan. I'm talking about sitting down with a finance person and saying, hey, this is my plan. What do I need to do? And she telling me, this is how I would plan it, right? Those things that we have to consider, right? Hey, I need marketing. How am I going to go about that? Because remember, your business needs to have those things for it to be a successful business. And oftentimes we fail at the planning component because you're like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And you're just one person. You're not going to be able to do all those things. So what I mean by taking a leap of faith, it's the mindset. The leap is in the mindset. You want to do it. You're hungry for it. You're ready to, pursue it. That's great. But you still got to plan it and good preparation and stay in prayer as you're continuing to do it. Right?
Amen. Stay in prayer as you're continuing to go through the process and take the leap. I love, Suzette, what you said, that God planted you in this male dominated environment. He made room, God made room for you. I wanted to ask you, since God made room for you, and this is unfamiliar territory, who were the models you looked at or looked to in preparation for being in this environment?
That's such a good question because we're a whole lot of women, right? So I used to have to quite honestly talk to men. My male mentors to say, I want to have this conversation. What would you suggest? And it's more so taking away the element of male female, taking the emotion out of it, because a lot of times CEO can be very direct. I don't care what you have to say. They'll shut you down, right? And I'm sitting in that boardroom and I'm like, okay, I got to find another way to approach it because they're like, I don't, I want to hear what you have to say. That's not what I want to do. And as a woman, you might be in your feelings, to be perfectly honest. But if you are here for a strategic purpose, you have to tell yourself, okay, he's not listening to me. So I'd wait till we all go out to dinner. I'll purposely sit next to that person and I'll be in their ear. And I'd be and we start to have the casual conversations, we start talking, and then I start to get around to the strategy and I start to talk about my strategy in an informal way. There's a nuance, is what I'm trying to say. So a lot of my mentors were male, so to help me finesse in that. There were some women who helped along the way, but I'll be quite honest, I found that collaboration in those times were difficult coming from women because it was such a competitive space. Over the years is when I got to have more of that women embracing me. But in the early stages, in my 20s and my 30s, I was really more so fending for myself because women, especially women who were minority, were in the few. So a sister kind of held on to her position and she felt if she shared, it complicated things for her. So I saw it was more so of a competitive track to than what it is now, right? And I'm thankful for that because it's good to see that the paradigm shifted because quite honestly, it wasn't too many of us in corporate roles, back when I was in my 20s and 30s, right? So it's a different paradigm now that we embrace more. There's diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I was in those spaces, there was no diversity, equity, and inclusion. None of that. So as a minority, it was like maybe 2 or 3 of us. We could count how many of us were in corporate.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I want to offer the opportunity for any of our students, our guests, or be partners to ask Suzette a question that may be burning with you, if you have so.
Miss Joan, were you about to speak? Go ahead.
Oh, I think she might have froze.
I think so too.
Okay, well, should we wait for her to reconnect? Kylie, go ahead and ask your question. Ms. Jones, we're gonna wait for your connection to get stronger.
Okay. My question is actually rather simple. Even as you said, with a financial planner and sit down with someone in marketing, what if you don't have those funds yet? Like, what can you do? Can you still just work on it yourself and find out to the best of your ability to even start? I mean, I know you can't do it all by yourself, but what if you can't hire those other people yet?
Yeah, no, there's a barter system. I did a little bit of that, right? So you get a little bit creative, you come up with the barter system, especially in the early stages. What I mentioned before is, finding a job to sort of feed the machine. I used to say that My corporate job was my banker. It was feeding the machine of my dream. So, as much money as I could put towards my business, I did. But you could do a bartering. What can you offer a marketing person in exchange for their services, right? And so you kind of put yourself in those types of networking circles whereby you can offer up, those types of services. And I found that that was helpful for me. If you do a lot of those breakfast networking, um, meetings, and you kind of find out who's at the table, and then you start to exchange information. And I'm always keen on having those conversations of, hey, what do you do? And then, I was very blessed some years ago to go to something called CEO Space. And one thing they used to play is you would sit in the middle and you'd be in a circle of people. You would talk about what you did and you say, who do you know? So that always stuck with me, that even if you weren't offering services, I would say, who do you know? I do HR services. Do you know somebody who needs an HR service? And in the meantime, I'm looking for a marketing person. Who do you know? And somebody in that circle would often say, oh, I got this card from a Suzette Salandi, so somebody would call me and say, oh, I got your card from so-and-so. They met you at a breakfast. And, so it's you barter in the early stages, you barter. Yeah.
Great question, Kylie. Miss Joan, are you ready for your question?
My question was, I think she answered the question. She's started talking, she was talking about men, and you know how men are. And she answered the question because mine was, well, how do they treat you? Because men seem to sometimes don't want women to be in their space.
Yeah.
Well, not their space, but
Yeah.
So, but then I was glad to hear that they accepted you.
Yeah, it just depends on the country. So I'll be very candid. A country like Dubai, right?
Yeah.
In those days, I would say, because now it's gotten quite progressive, more women empowerment. But when I would travel to like Russia and Dubai, in the boardroom when I sat, most of the men in those roles, most of the people in those executive roles were men. The woman coming into the room is somebody bringing me my coffee or my tea, which I had a problem with anyway. But just to say, when the executive assistant was the woman coming in and saying, Miss Suzette, would you like coffee or tea? So now we've gotten more progressive and we see that. But back then, that was just the playing field, right? So when I walk in, they're looking at me like, who are you? So
Yeah.
in order for me to play in that space, I got to understand the rules. And in order for me to understand the rules, I got to understand the game plan. And at that time, my male mentors would give me the game plan. They would tell me, okay, where you're going, this is how it's going to be set up. This is how it's going to go. And you might have to, have dinner with Oleg Savinov, for example, from Russia. When you have dinner with him, you talk to him about his family, you kind of talk to him, see about the strategy, and he's going to receive you differently. And it isn't a sense of like I was trying to manipulate anybody, but you have to understand the culture. In certain countries, I can't come in with my aggressiveness or try to I gotta understand the culture and the protocol. Over years, that has changed, not in too many countries, but in a few. I still think if you go to Russia, considering the kind of leader that Putin is, you're not going to see a whole lot of females in executive roles, right? So that it's a finesse when you come into certain countries to understand the playing field is what I would say. Yeah.
Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, let us
just say that I appreciate what you just said as far as saying it might seem manipulative, because I was just talking to someone about that. They were saying, you have to strategize. And I said, to me, I have a hard time because at times that seems so manipulative. And that's just not. So when you just said that, bless me though, but the sake of it is strategizing, a strategy to know the culture, to know how you can come into a different space and what you might need to say or do in order to interact with that person. So you just blessed me by using strategy versus manipulation, because at times to me, it feels manipulative.
Yeah, no, and that's why I want people to understand from a global perspective. For me to have been successful in the work that I was doing for some of these companies globally, I had to understand the culture. For example, and I can tell you a ton of global stories, but in Brazil, you got to sit and you got to have lunch, and lunch could be for 2 hours. And when I first started to travel, I would be so like, why are we sitting here? It's 2 hours of lunch. But for them, breaking bread, getting to know you is how they want to operate in the business space. So if they say, come on, let's go for lunch, they sit, they get to know me. When I go back and I start to talk strategy, there's an openness because now they know me a little bit more and they can receive me a little bit more, right? Our American culture is quite different. You know, everything is drive through, everything is hurry up, let's get it done, let's get it done. In certain cultures, people want to see the human side of you. They want to know that I was a mom. They wanted to know that I was, it's just, that's just how it is. So you connect differently in certain cultures. So for my business, because this is how I continue my business, to grow in a global sphere, I have to learn the art of relationship building. And even as you decide to leap and do your own business, you have to understand the element of relationship building and understand that your first cup of coffee with someone may not get you the business, but you still start to build that strategy and build that relationship. Everything is relationship building, right?
That was a golden key right there, the art of relationship building. Thank you, Suzette. Thank you so much. So I want to now introduce you to my friend, Edward Underwood, who I became connected with through the church that I previously served at. And I have stayed connected with him through social media, get a preview of his growth and giftedness in photography. And Suzette, you had said that you have to get connected with a financial, someone in finance. And I believe, Edward, that you actually started in the field of finance. I'm not certain. But I'm just going to let you, I'm just going to get on the way and allow you to share your story and your leap of faith from where you may have started into where you are now.
Yes. So I'll just go back a little further. So I am a photographer currently. In a previous life, I had a double degree in finance and political science. I thought I was going to go to law school and end up working in campaign finance, and that didn't work. I still owe my dad money for a Kaplan course that he is never getting back. I think I did pretty well on the LSAT. I didn't study as hard as I should have in undergrad, but I did become a policy writer for a couple years in the federal government. And I was also a financial analyst and a senior financial analyst, and then I managed a bunch of analysts for years. During that time, I started to dabble in photography. It got to the point where I was buying too much gear, and my wife was like, "You need to monetize all this gear," and it became pretty organic from there. I think one of the things that's like key with me is that organic growth. Like I study trends in my particular field. I've always been great with planning. I'm pretty methodical with the way that I move through things. I think a lot of it is because I'm an only child. I've always just had to depend on me. So I do what I can. And that leap of faith is just understanding that over time, if you're doing what God expects you to do, those doors will open, and they always do. I think the one thing about being an entrepreneur, specifically being a creative entrepreneur, is every day is that leap of faith, right? There are days that I meet with several clients and I'm booked and busy. It may be months where I'm not. And you just have to understand, like, I was put in this place for a reason, right? You just have to learn sometimes to sit still. And that's really difficult, especially when you see your peers able to do things that you may not be able to do right now, right? And I think during COVID, that was like the test for me. A couple years ago, I was in South Africa at a conference for Black wedding professionals. And there's a guy who led this particular organization. He's Nigerian. And he said something then that stuck with me, and it was preparing for harvest, right? Um, and I didn't really understand what it was at the time, but I pulled him to the side the next day. I was like, could you like elaborate on that? Like, what exactly does that mean? So more or less like the preparing for harvest is even though you have a business, you're going to have those years or those months out of the year where, you have like this large influx of cash. The wise man, the wise farmer is always preparing for harvest, meaning like there are going to be those times when things aren't going well, right? Like you don't have clients knocking down your door, but you still have to be able to sustain your life, sustain your family, because that's your honor, that's your duty, right? Um, and it was like something that I took, and I think that was like in 2017. And of course, like during COVID, it was one of those moments, right? I had so much stuff planned for that particular year. Like we had a couple clients out in California. Everything looked great, right? Towards the end of the year. And then heading into those COVID months, like we would start getting like people who would ask for refunds back, or what I thought was going to be like the banner year ended up being like a year where I think I only did like maybe 30% of what I thought I was going to do. But thankfully, because we did prepare for harvest on our end, we were still able to pay bills. Like we didn't run into any issues. And that's just like just to back up, like, so I'm a photographer. My wife is also an interior designer. So it's always like these conversations about, how to grow our business, how to strategize, or how to deal with those problem clients, or it's always like at our dinner table those conversations, which is great because even though our businesses and entities are separate, it sort of operates like one. We're all under this one shield, which I love. She works with me on my end. I photograph most of her designs on her end. Um, so it's been really cool, like having that creative partner to bounce those ideas off, and then to share, the stories that or the things that I deal with on my end, and then her doing the same for me, and then us being able to use like those separate strategies in our different fields. My field is a little bit different from the previous field where it's mostly male dominated. Mine is different. Wedding photography, especially on the East Coast, actually most places, is usually dominated by white girls, white women. And like I'll go into a room, I go into conferences, I'll meet with clients. I've been at weddings where I'm the only Black person there. So it could be initially it was a little weird. Like it was strange, but it's one of those things like you just take it as a challenge, right? I think one of the things that I think I've been really blessed with is I have an ability to find ways to relate with most people. And I think it served me well in my particular industry. I've been able to find not always necessarily photographers, but just people within the industry that have more experience than I do. And it's been great hearing those stories from them, how they start, how they strategize, and in every business, how to be able to pivot, right? What I did 3 years ago as a photographer, I can't do anymore. You start to look at, new technologies. Like I use a lot more AI now that I didn't use in years past. It has made my processes easier. It's allowed for me to take on different business lines. I can now edit what used to take 3 weeks in 3 days. So I'm able to, leverage this new technology to impress clients, get work out faster. Yeah, so I think my advice would be for anyone that is looking to start a business venture, is to be realistic. Um, I think you do need to have mentors, and they don't necessarily have to be in your field. Align yourself with people who share the same mission, vision, and values that you have. Because a lot of the building that you do with these mentors is beyond business, right? These people become, the people who discuss you outside of these industries, right? These are the people who trust you. These are the people that they pivot and they work with you along the lines. Like I have clients that I met over a decade ago, that we go on vacations with, right? That because of my loyalty to them and vice versa, and because I've been vulnerable with them and they've seen my family grow, they help to open other doors. Like they're integral in making sure that you get the proper funding that you need, making sure that you're in those rooms that you need to be in, and all that is just that organic growth that God creates for you. I think that you do need to be honest about systems and processes. One of the things that I've always been big on is making sure that you're working smarter, not harder. Um, it's so integral. Like most of the emails that I send personally, most of that stuff has already been pre-done. Like I can just go and pull up a template and make some quick tweaks. Like nothing that I do to this point in my business is from scratch. So I will always say align yourself with those business coaches. A lot of people that I've used just throughout my time is working on those systems. My wife uses systems for her business as well. It makes it a lot easier to focus on the larger term goals that you have for your business, because at some point it will pivot, right? Like when you first start your business, you're the one that's putting up your Instagram posts. You're the one that's answering all your emails. You're the one that schedules everything. And as your business grows and articulate, yeah, exactly. Like you have to have like all of those things in place. The good thing is because of Al Gore's internet, there is a lot of stuff that is available now that wasn't there, years ago, decades ago. There's I think a system or a program I used a lot called Canva. And that way you can kind of create your own semi-professional looking social media feed, content and all that stuff. And that's the thing. I think one of the other things that you have to be really good at is obviously managing your time. It's easy to be distracted by what other people are doing. It's easy to try to create your business in whatever model that you see other people who are successful in. So I think you do need to honestly have that and take a good inventory of what your skill set is, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and then have realistic goals that you can actually meet, so that you do feel like that you are achieving something, right? We still in our house do quarterly planning meetings, for our own personal stuff, for our business goals. I have a lot of professional friends that are my age, older and younger. So it's always interesting to throw ideas out to them, seeing what they're working on, what tools they're using. So I think it's important to surround yourself with people who are like-minded. Like I said, they don't necessarily have to be in your industry, but people who have those same personal goals for that you are trying to achieve. The final thing about the leap of faith, as I mentioned before, I feel like every day is a leap of faith, right? Because none of the stuff is for the faint at heart. Like there's a lot of competition in all fields, especially in this area where a lot of people are professional, a lot of people are driven, a lot of type A personalities. But I think you do need to have that faith, right? I think it's important that you have those daily devotionals, those daily talks, those daily walks with God. I was talking to my son, who is a senior in high school, about that also. Because he does, he has his little devotionals that comes to his email, and he asks me, how many times do you pray? I was like, I don't pray. I talk to God constantly, all day, about everything. And that's what you just have to do. Like you understand that he put you in this place, in this space for a reason. And you do just have to lean on that, especially when things aren't great, right? It's that understanding that God never put you in a position that you can't handle. It doesn't mean that you won't fail, right? But sometimes what it means is that you need that failure. You need to understand the things that you didn't do correctly in order for you to continue to progress forward, right? Because progress isn't always linear. So for me, having that personal faith, having a real bold faith, like when you don't know what that next quarter is going to look like, but understanding that I'm here, I have these tools, I have everything that I need to be successful, and you just lean on it, and those doors open. That's all I have to say about that.
You said a lot. You said every day is a leap of faith, and this is not for the faint in heart. How do we keep from fainting? Like, what support system do you have in place outside of, you know, your creative, your wife who works in tandem with you? But we in the book, Bishop Jakes talks about disruptive partnerships. So what support do you have in place to keep you from fainting, continue to move forward, to not turn away when you're faced with fears?
I have tribes and a bunch of them. Like I have a group of older guys. You know, they're not creatives at all. But I meet with them often, and a lot of it is, you know, how do you guys sustain your homes, right? How do you sustain your families? Like we talk about our challenges together, and I think that part is definitely needed, right? So I have that tribe. Of course, my parents, and the funny thing about my parents is I got old school Black parents, right? You know, creative jobs aren't real jobs. So it was years before my mom actually understood what it was that I did, right? I thought she thought it was some little hobby, right? And then I think honestly, it took like 5 years for her to get it, like to figure it out. I'll never forget, like when my wife left her job to go take another job and her dad almost lost it. And it was along those lines. It's like, unless you grow up in a space where, you know, it's okay for you to dream, we always still have to be practical, right? So that was it. But now it's different. You know, my parents definitely had my back. I actually shot something at the church yesterday for them, and my mom was like as proud as a peacock. And for me, it was hilarious because I remember when it was not that way, right? So definitely have my parents. Obviously, I have my spouse. I have my kids, which is crazy. Like I have a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they know like they'll come down into my office and they'll see like the closet door open and they see me like cleaning and packing gear. And they're like, yo, so how many shoes do you have tomorrow? Right. Or if I'm out, they're definitely calling, you okay? How much longer are you going to be? And when I come home, like they know, like for me, I'm an introverted extrovert. Right. So when I'm working with people, I'm high, like I'm real high, like I'm available, I'm open, I'm smiling a lot. But when I come home, I'm tired, right? Like I don't want to talk. And it's cool how they understand it, right? My 17-year-old, me and him are like super cool. He knows to give me that space. But then the next morning, like he's definitely telling me everything that happened that other day. Like, yeah, man, you know, LeBron played 39 minutes and this soccer match this happened. And then he'll just ask me questions. So definitely have that tribe. And then I'll have like other creative friends. And those are the people that I can vent to about what's happening or how this didn't go, how this did go, and just pivot off of that. So I think those are the people who prop me up. Like they really sustain me. That keep all this stuff going, because at least once a year I want to quit and just be done with it. And those are all the people that kind of pick me back up, dust me off, and get me going back down the road.
Let's get Suzette back in here. Suzette, you have a comment?
I just love how he summarized so much, because I can so relate, right, to what Edward has shared. First and foremost, it is really hard for people who are not entrepreneurs to understand you as an entrepreneur. So, you know, if you have a lot of 9-to-5 people in your circle, they're not going to understand. So when I got around more entrepreneurs, it was easier because they get it. Because you really need that support system in terms of what Edward is describing. That's number one. Number two, the AI space you gotta understand it. Y'all hear it,
Yes.
understand the AI space because it is real. And I'm already getting questions because I'm in HR. So Suzette, what jobs do you think will be obsolete in the next 5 years? And it's hard to say, but there are some for sure that you kind of know at some point AI is going to have a stronger presence. And so, there might be some governance over that, but the reality is, as a business owner, you need to understand AI. You really
Yep.
do. You can't be deaf to it, blind to it. And the last thing I would say is, oftentimes the biggest way that you get business is through referrals. And I, really pride myself on making sure that I don't overpromise and underdeliver. That can be your biggest challenge because you cannot always get away from a bad review or a bad. I get a lot of my business because somebody sees me on LinkedIn and they're like, oh yeah, Suzette Salandi, you need a lot of my clients were through LinkedIn and referrals. For others, it might be different, but it's always somebody that says, hey, you should check out Kylie. She does this, she that. So do not overpromise and underdeliver because that can become your biggest Achilles heel, where you get to be that business owner where people are like, yeah, it does good work, but man, it took them 2 weeks to get back to me, or took her 2 weeks. And then you start to build that type of reputation. So you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So how you manage your time and your treasure is very, very important.
Suzette, while we still have you here, if you are comfortable with sharing, what's going to be your next big leap?
So I want to be global. My business will have to have a global impact. That is what I dream about every day. So my leap is to build a presence starting in the Middle East. I'm already working on that. And it takes me out of my comfort zone. Sometimes when I say it, I'm like, my hands are shaking, but it's what I want to do. It's my God-given purpose. So, you can get addicted to your comfort zone. I just want to tell you all that. But my next leap is to be a presence in the Middle East. It's a beautiful place, and I feel like I have a calling there, so that's where I'm headed. Yeah.
Eric, what about you?
So the pivot now is away from weddings, and more into architectural and interior work. There are like no Black people shooting houses. I'm not talking real estate. I'm talking like interiors and architecture. It's a longer process. It's a slower process. I mean, these shoots take days to complete. I've done a few with Shauna, with a couple of her design friends from graduate school, and I love it because it's highly technical. Um, it's a lot more collaborative, and I really like it. So we're pivoting a little bit to make more space to do that type of work. I've already been published in a couple magazines for her projects, so I'm pretty open to it. I think I may be a bit of a disruptor at this point, moving into these spaces where it's not a lot of people who look like me, and I'm okay with it. So that's the move for this upcoming year.
You are a disruptor. You don't have to think about it. So, Hannah, I want to thank you for sharing that resource inside the chat. I want to open it up for anyone else who has questions or comments, praise.
I just want to know how to get time. I would love to go back to Dubai. If you got any scholarships, that let me know. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But
No problem.
I think that's very disruptive too. Oh, I'm sorry. I can get back on camera. I'm still kind of on the clock, so I'm sorry, God. In and out a little bit, but that's very disruptive because of the culture, as you mentioned, Suzette, especially in Dubai. So I'm like really shocked that you're doing that out there. Yeah, that is a major disruptive act. So I'm keeping my eye on you, ma'am. See what you're doing. I love it. And it's just powerful. I love to see you making those power moves. Like I said, especially in that culture, that's amazing. So I just applaud you. Prayers up for you as you continue to expand. And Yeah, this is awesome. Russia, when you said Russia, I'm like, ooh, like, man, you're in some, yeah. I don't know how you're doing it, but
Good Lord.
kudos, man. Just
The Lord
kudos.
has called me. Lord calls me to those places, but thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And you all can share your social media information so that they can connect and connect with you, look you up, website, whatever you want to share. Hannah, I see your hand. So come on in. Come on in.
I'll be quick. No, I just wanted to say that both of the stories and your work was very inspiring. I think personally what really, I have this kind of fire, but our light kind of gets dim sometimes. I always say that we have to keep in mind there are people who are time adverse, meaning they are doing exactly what everybody else is doing to scale their business, the AI, but you're just doing it somewhat through a bottleneck because you have to work multiple jobs or you're going to grad school, even if you scale back. That's just kind of my life. And so that does prompt me getting just a little burnt out sometimes, but to hear some of the same practices, as long as I'm yielding really good results, it's very inspiring. It takes hours sometimes to build systems and processes, but it's so exciting when you launch them and they're like in place. And sometimes I feel crazy because no one understands why I'm sitting here, auto populating or creating, user journeys and backwards planning, or when people come to me and I not reject them, but tell them, everybody wants that pretty storefront, but then you get to the door and there's no product, there's no building, there's no customer service. It's trash because everybody wants to look good. And that, just to hear that people put in the work and do that backwards planning piece says, one, I'm not wasting my time. There are others who think like that, which is why I love the Disruptive Thinking book. You all highlighted a lot of things from disruptive alliances, the different tribes that you're in, even not being around creatives, but just people who support other areas and being the difference. How you said you wanted to go into architecture and interior, shooting, and why, right? Just being the difference, right? Being the solution. It was very inspiring. I love hearing people who are like-minded, not just because it's wonderful, but it kind of reminds you you're not too far off track and keep going. So thank you.
Yeah. Hannah, what space are you interested in, just out of curiosity? What space are you interested in if you were to do a business, or if you
I have a business. I'm 100% in the consultant space, and I build brands to make a social impact. So my foundation is all about social impact. And so all my clients range from government to churches. And so if you have an idea to make an impact, I bring that to life. And that's pretty much what I do, which really, if you want to give it an industry, that is the communications, marketing, brand industry.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, that there tends to be that bottleneck because everybody who's in that sort of field is moving the boat in that direction.
Right.
What might be helpful is sometimes you think about unique ways that you can offer something to those clientels per se, or even looking at a different set of clientele that you could potentially, it's sometimes thinking out of the box, being a bit more creative than most of your other folks. So for example, for me with the HR consulting, I was like, okay, what could I offer that most other HR consulting services don't offer, right? And I started to really think through, okay, what could I give them, that they may not get from a typical HR consulting company. And that's why I started to think about, oh, I could offer this service and say, oh, I could give you this service, and it could be a subscription service. So if you just subscribe to me every month, I'm just going to offer you this specific service. And it's sort of my concierge service, and I started to use those key branding words, as you know, to make the client feel special. So sometimes you really got to sit down and think out of the box and be like, what can I offer them that most of my other clients aren't offering?
I love your insight. In January, actually, someone came to me with an idea of just partnering with professional development funding in colleges to brand college presidents.
There you go.
It took what you guys said, one, partnering with a company that has the inside in higher education to get approved through procurement. And then what part do I provide, which is the branding. It was very scary to write that scope. and what that would look like. So we will see, but that is exactly what you just said, the inside. And I kind of feel chills because it was a leap of faith. It's in the approval process now. And if approved, we already have 10 presidents lined up. So it's the only, like, it's president coaching plus branding. So we don't provide the coaching. Another college president, my friend, does, and then I do the branding. So very nervous, but thank you for the affirmation and the reminder that I'm kind of going the right direction.
You sure are. And
Because I do social impact work. I'm an organizer. So like think about ACLU, gun violence prevention work, but I have to do that. I can't stop doing that. I'm a mom. So I just can't shift off. So I needed to think out of the box, and thank you for that, because you're telling me it's possible. Thank you.
And be bold. Reach out to some of the people on the social media that you're looking at and saying, and just introduce yourself. And just introduce, send them something, into their DMs. And just sometimes it's the bold move that gets you, because God will open the door for you, honey. He will open that door. So
Amen.
just know, do not ever think that, oh, that person won't look at that, because I thought that way until God opened up a door for me. And I was like, oh my God, this person just responded to me. So never underestimate the power of God. And your belief system has to be aligned to know that, there's nothing too small for God, nothing too big for God to do, so just keep that focus. Okay. And you're beautiful, by the way. I love your picture. So
Thank you so much. Thank you.
yeah. Britni, I canceled my appointment. So I just want you to know, I text the people and said, listen, I got to stay in this class today. So I really love this. Thank you for inviting me. So.
I'm grateful. We have about a couple more minutes. So if anyone wants to get a last comment or question in. Dr. Chad?
Yes, it's not a question, but I'll just say to Suzette and Edward, as the young adult pastor in the space, first of all, thank you for coming and providing your expertise. I'm driving, sorry, this one, my camera's off. Somebody's with me. But providing your expertise in this, it was very necessary. It was very needed, very relevant, very timely, especially for many of us who are in the space of building or getting that entrepreneurial spirit. I just launched a dissertation business, and so just listening to all that you're doing and that you're sharing, and I watch Hannah and all the things that she does, and we work closely together often. And so I'm just grateful for everything. And thank you, Reverend Dr. Britni, for even bringing them into this space to help us all grow. And so both of you have taken us higher, and we are grateful. And I pray that God continues to crown your ministries with nothing but success.
Yeah.
Amen. And with that, we say thank you, God, for your leadership, your presence, your spirit. God, we ask that you will bless these two entrepreneurs. We ask that you would grow them. We ask that you would prosper them. And we ask that now that we're connected to them, that you would grow us and that you would prosper us. We thank you for visions. We thank you for dreams. And we thank you that you are bringing them into reality. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.